Wow, does that mean we're live?
Are we live now? Is
We're live now? Oh wow,
we,
where did that come
what are
from?
people looking at right now? Jeremy, you need to show your screen with it.
Yeah, I know. I'm going there. It's all
Oh
live.
man,
Look at that, right? Picture perfect. Using AI to
beautiful.
enhance images.
You can press hide.
Oh yeah. Here's the HUD. Let's try that again. Picture perfect using AI to enhance images. Welcome everybody to our fourth live stream surrounding the topic of artificial intelligence inspired technology. In the past, we have done ChatGPT, LLMs, pushing the limits of LLMs. And today, Andrew, what are we doing?
We're pushing the limits of imaging
Yeah,
with AI.
let's take a quick look at some of the stuff we'll be doing. But before we do that, it's kind of worth mentioning. So, well, okay, I'll take a step back. We're going to be looking at two categories here of working with imaging in artificial intelligence. First half really will be working with Topaz Photo AI, which we're going to discuss in a second. Andrew will be handling much of that. Things that he's going to be covering are supposedly kind of low-level production tasks, or you could look at them as kind of the grunt work of photo imaging. So stuff like upscaling low-res images, denoising, sharpening, uh, but in fact, it's much more than that. And we're going to talk about that in a second. The second half of this is we're going to jump into Photoshop and look at some relatively new features that Adobe has thrown into the mix, including some camera raw improvements, which are pretty mind blowing. But the AI part of that in particular will be these categories of generative fill, generative expand, so using AI to modify your images um, in ways that, quite frankly, were uh, either really hard to do in the past or impossible. And the truth is, Andrew, is it fair to say that we've, I don't know, like I feel like you and I have talked a lot about the hype cycle of AI, and like we've both been kind of blown away by some of the advancements, and then the reality kind of crashes and we're like, oh yeah, maybe it's not that great. And then we're like, oh wait, no, that's cool. And then it goes down and like, maybe not so great.
Yeah,
Didn't
we have
quite
a
work.
very short waves of hype and disillusionment happening with every product. It seems like every day we have all four seasons of our love and hate of this technology. I think
Yeah.
what's interesting is, we talk about AI and like AI is in everything, and it's a little bit like, I don't know, I'm dating myself, but at a certain point, like turbo was put onto everything, and like, oh, it's that turbo toothpaste, and this idea of like, just put the word on, and then people will think it's magical. And so I think that there are a lot of things that make claims that they are using AI, and in this case, this is absolutely the application of machine learning. It's absolutely the generative AI magic that we've seen for creating images out of nothing,
Yeah.
the conjuring up of images. And in the case of Topaz, it's using the generative AI to leapfrog over the number of steps that might have been required in order to do a lot of these things in a compelling way. And Jeremy, you and I have been making photographs for
Yeah.
our whole lives, and we've seen I mean, we both made our first digital photographs with sensors that were the size of I don't even know what, and
Yeah.
with a maximum resolution of 640 pixels. And
Yeah.
we were blown away by that. And we've seen a crazy evolution in imaging technology.
Yeah.
And in some ways, like this is seismic.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree. And the interesting thing too is, I don't know, when a lot of this technology came out or started to really hit the mainstream, um, I'm going to say like a year ago plus some. So the summer of 2022, that sound right? Something like that. And I remember looking at this and did a few presentations and saying like, yeah, like people are criticizing it, but it's going to keep changing and it's going to keep getting better and better. And what you're going to see, or what we've noticed, is some of the things we're about to show you have changed in just the last week. Like the acceleration of essentially what we predicted a year ago. We're like, yeah, no, like this is just, the ball has just begun to roll. And it does keep getting bigger and more and better and crazier. And we kind of started this, the idea for this particular live stream, with this hypothesis that a lot of these tools, and this one in particular is called Topaz. We don't have anything to do with them. It's just these guys have been in this game for like 4 or 5 years. So they've been doing a lot in terms of AI-based image generation as well as optimization, as long as anyone. And you can kind of see their, what I'm calling their value statements. And we know this is their marketing page, so take this all with a grain of salt. But it's actually a good place to start, because this is what their software is proposing to do. So things like enhancing, whoops, that's not going to work. Enhancing the quality of your images using sharpen and denoise, increasing resolution, so upscaling by generating real detail. We're going to look at this. And then they've got some other ones which they're calling beta in some cases. Remove distractions is actually something we're going to see now. And their marketing page hasn't even kept up with it, because we're actually able to use that. In fact, you have a demo that you showed me, which was kind of amazing. And we'll
Yeah,
see later.
things are moving really fast. Like quite literally, I don't know how to express this, but like the problems that we ran into in testing this software 2 days ago have been fixed.
Yeah.
Like that's fast.
Yeah, and so it is happening, and again, both Andrew and I in our past lives had a lot of experience in digital imaging. I actually had the title of digital imaging specialist at one point. Like that was what I was called, and really it meant like retouching photos and making prints and stuff. And this was back in 1999 and 2000. So what I was doing then seemed like magic to most folks. And now, there's no comparison. You can do those same things in the blink of an eye. That used to take me half an hour, things like that. So I'm going to kind of flip it over to you because you're going to kick it off with some discussion of the Topaz software slash plugin. And we should point out that this is either a standalone application, which you can run on its own, or more likely, and we've found it to be in some ways more efficient, to just go into Photoshop, like Andrew is doing here with a past version of himself, and use the plugin from within Photoshop.
You ready to see magic?
Let's see it.
Thank you, Ramon. All right. We are hidden. Okay, let's get started. This is a fantastic glamour shot of myself. You can see this is 100%. It's 640 pixels by 480 pixels at 140 dots per inch, 144. So just realize that in order to make a 4x6 print, those kind of rubbishy prints that you get at a drugstore, we would need to increase this 4 times in order to get enough pixels to make a compelling image. Now, and one that's not all fragmented. The reality is, this is a terrible photograph. I mean, apart from the fact that it's captured me in such a handsome light, it's grainy. It was a terrible camera, old camera. There's all sorts of artifacts, JPEG artifacts and the like. Now, I've just opened this in Photoshop. It's a JPEG. It's a standard thing. We could do any number of things to try and increase the size of this image. We could just do an image resize, in which case Photoshop uses some of its non-AI magic, but stuff that it's been doing for a million years, which is interpolating distances between some pixels so it doesn't just make a really big pixelated version of this image. It does a slightly better job than that, but it is still heavy-handed. Also remind you that if we were shooting this with film, bigger negatives can make bigger prints. It's just the law of physics, I guess. And so medium format cameras generally produce negatives that are much larger, so you can print those larger without degradation of the image. You can print an image from anything if you want, but it's about the quality. Anyway, I can't stand this picture, so we're going to fix it. How many times, Jeremy, have you been asked on freelance projects and the like to use an image, and the only one that's available is some crazy, terrible quality JPEG, just like this? I mean, don't I look like a CEO or a founder or something? And it's like, oh, we need this to go on the homepage.
Right.
And you look at it and it's like, I can't do magic with this.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you don't have the high res.
Yeah, the analogy I used to use, even back 25 years ago, is like trying to turn a postage stamp into a poster.
Yep, exactly that.
There's only so much data information inside that postage stamp, and to scale it up to the size of the poster, you're in for a bad time.
And that's what I'm going to do.
What? You're going to turn a postage stamp into a poster?
Yep, totally. So 640 pixels, let's call that the postage stamp. And so, okay, I've run Topaz AI as a plugin in Photoshop. I'm going to give you a
Now,
quick...
I think I might have missed something, Andrew, because the second you open this, like a whole bunch of stuff happened.
Magic.
You didn't even click. You didn't even ask it to do anything.
I didn't have to do anything. I dragged and dropped. So the way that this works, so what we're looking at is the Topaz interface. You can see the before image over here, the pixelated one. I can't believe I used this as the first image. And this is the fixed one. Now, I don't know how I feel about the fixed one. It looks a little off to me, but that's okay. Considering what we started with, it's pretty good. I also look like I had a messy, I don't know, like a powdered donut or something before. Anyway, yeah, so on the left-hand side, you can see that there's this preview, and we can slide this around and move around and navigate the image. And as you can see, when I'm moving it, it goes back to its terrible former self. And when I let go, it does an update. Now, if we make any changes, and you can see the number of things that we can do here, these are different processes that we can run on the image, that it'll take some time to regenerate. So anyway, the first thing is that it upscaled it by 4 times. And generally, when the automatic process that Topaz does is it takes a look at the image, it takes a look at the image size, and it makes a bunch of decisions based on what it sees, and I'm going to put that in the finger quotes, what it sees in the image, and the decisions that it's going to make about enhancing and improving the quality of this for output or for a final result. In this case, it did what it called autopilot, and those settings you can adjust to your preference, but we're just using the factory settings. You can see that upscale by 4 times is what it did. There's a little blue switch here that shows that it did it, and the green dot, which indicates that that was recommended by autopilot. The other thing that generally you do to solve imaging problems like this is you might remove noise. That's turned off, okay? And we'll find out why. Sharpening, well, that's something that you'd want to do as well, but that's also turned off. It recovered my face, and you can mouse over and it'll show you. And I mean, obviously that's not all that surprising, but if there were 2 faces in this image, then it would say recovering face, and you could see 2 yellow squares. And then there's some other things, adjust lighting, balance, color, preserve text. We'll look at all of those. Each one of these you can click and it'll expand and tell you what it's done. Also give you specific settings that you can tweak. So in this case, we can see that it upscaled it by 4 times. So this is the final image dimensions, 2,560 pixels by 1,920 pixels. Right here it says AI model, and it applied what it called the low resolution model. Topaz has a number of different AI models that it uses for each one of these processes, each one of these fixes. And it will base the decision of which one to use on what it understands to be the imaging problem that it's trying to address. Yeah. So much like the generative AI tools like Midjourney and DALL-E, Firefly that generate images out of nothing, they were trained on a huge corpus of every image known to the web. And what Topaz did was they trained their models with a lot of images that were notoriously problematic, and then also really good quality versions of the same image. And so these models know the difference between film grain, digital artifacts, uh, uh, blocked out shadow detail, blur, etc. And so it uses those models to try and figure out how to fix it.
And
Anyway,
it's important to note, a lot of this, kind of happens transparently. You don't, you're not,
oh yeah, look, we
yeah,
didn't need to do anything. Like,
right,
right? I could have
right,
just pushed this big bluish button and said like,
yeah,
let's send this to Photoshop and let's print it, right? So,
yeah,
um, so if there are things that the automatic process has done that you're not all that happy with, you can adjust it. Now, this is a problematic image. There's not really much that it's doing that's making it worse, and so we're going to go ahead and and go with the automatic settings. There's some other examples where we'll do some adjusting and you'll see the results better. I think the only thing that I want to mention is that like remove noise was turned off by default. In every one of these processes, there's a certain amount of sharpening, a certain amount of deblurring, as they say, and a certain amount of noise reduction that's part and parcel to the process. So even if we look inside remove noise, if we I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to keep it turned on. But you'll see that there's settings for deblurring as well and recovering detail. And so I guess, depending on what it is that you're trying to do, it's going to provide a certain amount of denoising and sharpening, even if you're not saying remove noise specifically. Anyway, let's just go ahead and say save to Adobe Photoshop. And now we've got an image. And like, okay, so one of the things that the face recovery does is that it might make it look a little bit plasticky, but
yeah,
better than pixelated. But if you wanted to, you could always just drop the opacity of that of that layer down and sort of dial back some of the misery of the original if you're not happy with the plasticity of the fix. And of course, you can tweak and adjust and so forth. But that's okay. I've had enough of this image. Let's go to the next. Let's not save that. Um, I'm going to show you a more reasonable version of this. Okay, so my good friend Mike. Um, we photographed this portrait of his some time ago. I can't remember what the publication was or the purpose, but we needed an environmental portrait. It sort of captured, I think it had something to do with urban planning or urban development, and so we thought a gritty urban scene. He definitely looks worried. I don't blame him. This is a scan of the film negative that I shot. It's not a great exposure or anything. We can definitely fix this using regular, curves and so forth. But I think the important thing to note is this is 800 by 533 pixels. Now let's assume again, like, oh, we need this to run on the home page and it's going to be in the hero. Okay, 800 pixels. I'm sorry, but it's not going to cut it. And if we bump up the resolution just like zooming, we're going to get a lot of weird blurriness and glitchiness that we definitely don't want to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in Topaz and we're going to see what it does automatically. And then we'll see if we need to adjust it. And one thing I want to point out also is that Topaz runs both as an automation and then also as a filter plugin. And your particular workflow may indicate that you should use it one way or the other. It turns out running it in the automation flow gives you access to more functionality than it does as a filter. Again, these things seem to be changing daily, so it's hard to know. Okay, so there's Mike. He looks great. His face looks a little bit too smooth in a way, but that's okay. Let's see what else it did. So it upscaled by 4 times, and it applied the low resolution model, and it did a certain amount of minor denoising and a certain amount of minor deblurring, and as a result, did not automatically turn on remove noise. And the same with the sharpening. It also recovered face. So let's see what happens there. I'm going to zoom in, and you can see it definitely, I mean, it didn't do a bad job, right? We're talking about, we've just increased the
Yeah.
resolution of this to like 3,000 pixels. Like, that's kind of amazing. We can
It's
back
really
off the
worth,
amount of,
sorry,
yeah?
I'm just jumping in. I'm like really noticing like that. I mean, the face is cool, but the fringes of like the tie and those collar,
Yeah,
like
right?
that's your classic compression that is such a problem and would cause many people to just ignore using old photos to begin with. You know, like
Yeah, absolutely. This to me, like if I saw this image and I needed to use it at this size, I think I would say like, nope, I'm gonna just quit my job because there's no way that I'm gonna be able to do anything magical. Any diagonal or curved line immediately gets as crazy jaggy as when you're trying to make pixels out of nothing. And in this case, it's done a pretty remarkable job. So I think
I
that
agree that the face does look a little plasticky, sure.
it does, it does. And so, and if we turn off the recovering face, like I think, and again, it's like, okay, let's not recover the face. And do we have a good version? Like, I think it's good. And is it less plasticky? Well, I don't know about that. If we were to take the denoising down a bit, um, we can start to reintroduce some of the film grain, which then gives it a little bit of texture, and it becomes a little more natural. We can also increase the deblurring, which is the sharpening, and get a better result. Anyway, not bad, right? Um, Definitely usable. I'm going to give Mike the full resolution version of this, and he'll be really thrilled. Now I'm going to show you something else. Even though their marketing information suggested that removing objects was not coming soon, it's actually already here. They do label it as a beta thing. I'm going to show you how this works. Now, I know, Jeremy, that your demonstration is going to show ways to do this in Photoshop. Um, I don't know which is the best approach for removing objects. I have a feeling that it's going to end up being some sort of combination. But
Yeah.
the reality is, like, I'm going to tell you how this one removes the object, and then I don't know, we can just be amazed at the technology. Just like it has specific models for specific imaging challenges, it's going to create an ad hoc model to remove objects. So let's just say that this is a distraction, this snow. I'm going to paint this with a masking tool. I'm going to get, that's a bit of a distraction too. Let's just get rid of that. And I don't know, discarded package of cigarettes or something. And so now you can see there are a couple of adjustments on the right-hand side that we can adjust. We're going to, for the purposes of this example, I'm going to keep it to bias towards speed as opposed to quality because it takes a little while. I've clicked remove, and what it's doing is it's generating a specific model for removing these exact objects. So it's not using a generalized model. It's taking a look and analyzing what I'm trying to remove with the same kind of analysis that it uses to try and figure out like how to enhance, sharpen, or improve the image. Like I said, it takes a little while. It'll be worth it, I promise. I'm going to zoom back and voila.
Nice.
Okay, did you see that? I mean, right? I mean, am I
Snow, no
right?
snow, snow, no snow,
Did a nice job. And now, of
trash,
course,
no trash.
we say close and apply. There's one thing to remember, and that is just the way that this particular thing gets applied is that now you'll see that like the upscaling switches grayed out. Um, these other things are the things that it did are grayed out, and it's because once you've removed objects, you can't edit the things that you had adjusted in the enhancement. Again, it's just one of those weird things. here's the image, and I'm going to zoom back, and that's pretty good. We've got 3,200 pixels on the long edge. That's pretty good. Let's move on to another image. How about that?
Let's do it.
One more, one more, two
Okay.
more, two more quick ones. Another film scan. This was kind of an interesting shot. Again, 800 pixels. The benefit that, well, the crux of this photograph is that this person was so compelled to read this issue of Business Week, the best and worst managers. And Jeremy, in case you were wondering, as soon as this person put the magazine down, I grabbed it, I read it,
Yeah.
wondered why I wasted so much time in graduate school.
Right.
All my excellent management comes from that very
And that
article.
wow.
So I'm going to quickly jump to Topaz. It's going to do its magical thing. Of course, it detected no faces. And okay, it sharpened the image. It's given us the magical pixels, extra pixels. We can see that it didn't remove any noise specifically, but as part of the upscaling process, it did. But what it did was it made it look like this is some sort of a cutout paper art project. It's no longer.
Yeah, and to me, this is like a classic sign of AI, like getting its hands the in the middle of your stuff.
Totally,
Like just
totally.
that text melange is very characteristic. I see that now, and I'm like, yep, AI.
Yep.
Someone didn't clean it.
The heavy hand, the heavy hand with multiple fingers of AI. Okay,
Yep.
but check this out. Preserve text. That's a trick. Let's do that. So we'll pick a brush size. We're going to add this text, and we're going to say, please preserve this text, and apply. And wow, okay, that's better.
Yeah.
Still a little bit weird. It looks like the magazine's made out of, I don't know, plastic wrap.
Yep. But you could probably play around with it too. There's a noisy and compressed
Oh,
thing. There's a strength. There's all sorts of stuff. But
totally,
by and
totally.
large, I mean, that's like already, I wouldn't look at that and be like necessarily AI.
Right, and
Maybe the
the
business week is a
intent of
little
the
wacky,
image
but
is retained. I think the other thing is, like as you mentioned, so there are two
yeah.
different AI models that it
Yeah.
uses preserving the text, and in this case, it selected low resolution, which was probably the right choice. But if it's noisy or if it's because of over compression, so there are lots of JPEG artifacts, it'll use a different recovery method, and we can actually just toggle between them and see, like that's not better, but obviously that is better. So we'll trust it to use the right thing. And again, we open it in Photoshop. We can do whatever other editing that we want to do on this image, and it does a really pretty amazing job. And if you zoom way in, you'll see that there are some kind of weird things that it does, and it's like suddenly it's like, oh wait, it made AI cause. Like, I don't really like those cars. But again, I'll remind you that we're looking at this at 300% zoom on a 400% increase in size. And so in reality, you wouldn't really notice it. But once again, you can drop the opacity down. You could mask out some of the sections that you don't want the AI uh, fingerprints to be on and so forth. So it's pretty flexible. Okay, we're getting close to the really exciting stuff. Although I don't know, maybe this is exciting. I don't know. I hope it is. I'm going to show you two more things. So this is the Reverend H.D. Dennis. He's a remarkable man. Unfortunately, he passed away about a decade ago. He's a reverend in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and I had the sublime pleasure of getting a chance to meet with him. I spent, I think, a morning chatting with him. So you can still see his what he calls his church. It's this remarkable architectural feat that he's created in Vicksburg, and his wife owned a grocery store, and he began preaching outside the grocery store, and then eventually just started building this massive compound. Anyway, super amazing guy. And in the process of walking around and showing me, we were in this really strangely lit room. and I grabbed a shot. It's very, very low light. And so you can see it's got all that typical grain. And I say it's not really beautiful grain. It's not like film grain. It's got weird sort of horizontal striations. It's not great, but this is the image. And I haven't done any adjusting. This is the image as like out of the camera. And I'm going to show you. So I'm not going to do any adjusting to the image in this case. I'm just going to open it in. Oh, my bad. I am sorry. I messed that up. We're going to do that again. All right, live television. All right, so here it is. In Photoshop, let's get this into Topaz and see what magic it can do. Because we really want to get rid of that noise. We want to retain some of the character of this image. What's it going to do out of the box? And okay, well, so it got rid of the grain. It got rid of the grain really well. It made his face look a little bit smooth. And so let's see what it did. First of all, it was a large image, so it didn't do the automatic upscaling. It did the remove noise, and we can see a little bit about that. It used the normal model as opposed to a strong or extreme. Each one of these will do more smoothing for better or for worse. And what I'm going to show you here is this recover original detail. It may be the case that some of the character of his skin or the actual grain, if there is grain, we may want to bring back into the image. And so we can slowly bring this up, and it'll try and reintroduce some of the detail that the denoising function removed. The other thing it didn't do is automatic sharpening, and I'm going to turn on sharpen so that you can see what that would do. What it's done is it's made the highlights on his skin look really too sharp. I show you that. I turn it off. There's a certain softness, and then there's a certain over definition. Again, we're looking really close up. Maybe we would turn it off. Maybe we'd keep it on. It's really hard to know. But for the most part, it did a remarkable job. Now, you'll also see that it didn't do recover faces. And you think, but why? There's a face. Why wouldn't it want to recover it? It turns out, of course, there's nothing to recover. There's plenty of face detail. And if we do turn this on, and that autopilot is thinking, why would you do that? I made a better choice for you. You can see that it's actually made it worse by recovering the face. So as we've spent time using this tool, we've discovered that the first attempt that autopilot makes at enhancing the image tends to be improving. And I'm saying, like, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen steady improvements in how much confidence you can have in that first pass that it makes. There's some images that tend to be problematic, but literally in the last 2 days, some of the best examples where it's like, oh, finally, here's an example where Topaz really falls down. They fixed it. And so we're going to have to find more images that are problematic like that. The last image I'm going to show you is one that is going to be the most perfect smooth ramp into the magic that lives inside Photoshop itself and not just Topaz. And this is a sneak preview of the new functionality that's available in Camera Raw. So this is an image. I like street photography. The thing is that when you're on the go and you see a moment that you want to capture, like this accordion player who's contemplating his milk chocolate.
And just sorry to break in, just for folks who aren't crazy familiar with Camera Raw, you can just think of it as like a digital negative. So there's a lot of information about how that photo was originally taken inside this image, and you can kind of non-destructively play with it.
Yep, exactly. Camera Raw has a great deal more latitude than a JPEG. And so a lot of the adjustments that you make are at a much more granular level. And so it's more difficult to destroy the image that you if you're editing it as a raw file. And also just to point out that you are able to open DNG or camera raw files directly in Topaz, and it uses it does its magic on the DNG itself, as opposed to some sort of a conversion into bitmap, which we're going to do when we're done with this image and open it in Photoshop. So if you're opening a raw file in Photoshop, it's going to open this camera raw application, which was just updated like within the last few days. And I discovered this really interesting feature called lens blur. And I'm going to show it to you. I think there's an opportunity here for another live stream for sure. When we apply it, it's going to do a little bit of figuring out, and then it's going to apply a blur. Did you see that? I'll turn it off again and you can see it again. Okay, amazing. Now it's done the equivalent of shooting, making this look like it was shot with a very shallow depth of field. How shallow? Well, we can actually set that. So we can drag this slider over here and increase the amount of the image that's actually in focus, slowly but surely increasing more and more. I think it's a bit imperceptible at this point, but there you can see the difference between that and that. And we can make it extremely shallow. And we start to run into situations where we can make the actual chocolate out of focus right in front of his face. We can shorten the amount of focus so that even his candy is out of focus, and I think even the front of his accordion can be out of focus. Let's see, let me do this. And so we can really sort of find a slice in the focal length to in the image that we want to have in focus, similar to like a tilt shift lens or something like that. Anyway, what I'm going to show you though is kind of amazing. This is the amount that's in focus, and you're thinking like, okay, so what did it do? Like, I know that in Photoshop I could make a mask around this person and then do a Gaussian blur or a motion blur or a combination of blurs to make him pop out as the focused point, the focus subject. But we're not going to do that. We're going to look at what Photoshop is doing, and that is the line of focus right there. This is as far back and this is as far forward as we're getting in focus. And if you're not happy with what's in focus, you can paint in a section and so on and so forth. Anyway, kind of remarkable. Let's open this up. Now we've got a nice image, and we can open this in Topaz if we want to sharpen him, but I don't know, that's pretty good.
Pretty into me.
So anyway, that's like magic. But Jeremy, I think it's time for you to, I think it's
Yeah,
time
well,
for you to
again,
take
nice,
over.
nice, nice segue into Photoshop. And again, in this case, we're entering this realm where we're not quite sure ourselves exactly how much AI was involved, like in the camera raw. It's clear that there's some training of images, millions of images, that is going on. And in fact, that really is the core of all generative AI, LLMs, is just train, 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 get these computer systems to understand, like Andrew said, what both good photos look like, what bad photos look like, and then essentially add detail or remove it, but usually add it as needed.
Well, and in the
Oh, we're
case
gonna.
of the camera raw, the AI models were
Yeah,
looking to try and determine where the vanishing point is for the perspective and what the axis of the camera lens, so that it could make things in focus or out of focus relative to the position of the camera and the angle of the camera.
yeah. Which,
So
given the fact that it doesn't really, yeah, to me that example is mind-boggling.
yeah.
It's essentially like going back in time and switching out lenses in real time. But
Refocusing your shot before you make
yeah,
it, or after the fact that you've made it.
so we're going to now look at kind of the AI proper. These are a couple features that Photoshop added recently. And the first one is called Generative Fill. And what I would like to do first is kind of show you the old school way that you might approach, well, not even like this is like the medium school, or I don't know, what's between old and new. Anyway, whatever that is, this is what this is. So again, maybe 10 years ago, if I wanted to remove this or somehow kind of fill in this area where this woman has a phone and it feels distracting, and I'd like to maybe focus more on these three people here. So they had a feature and still have a feature called content aware fill. So I want to be very clear, this is not AI. This is kind of what I would again call the semi-traditional way of doing this automatically, if that makes sense. The old school way that I used to have to do is use the clone tool to just painstakingly clone all of those waves and stuff. But they came out with content aware about 10 years ago, and I'm going to click OK. And again, it doesn't do a terrible job, but it doesn't. There's kind of some problems. If I turn off the selection, you can really see there's some just noise and just, yeah, I don't know, like these waves here are not convincing. So it did an okay job, but I'm going to have to go back there and clean it up if I'm a photo retoucher. So that's kind of, again, the quote old way to do it. The new generative way, fill way to do it is to make some sort of selection. And I want to point out, I'm not making a very good selection here. I could have done this um, tighter or whatnot, but I'm just going to make a loop around this woman in general. And then there's a modal window at the bottom, and there is a button called Generative Fill. Now, it has a section for prompting, and we're going to come back to that later, but I'm not going to do anything here. I'm simply going to click Generate. And this is where the AI begins to kick in. It's looking at models, it's trying to understand the context of this photo, it's relying on God knows what. Um, and you can see here that already this seems to be a much better job. And there's a little set of arrows at the bottom. So it actually generates three variations of this by default. And again, you have to kind of look closely. You can see those waves changing. And you simply choose one that seems to be the most natural, or just whatever seems, whatever your preference is. And what I want to point out here, so this is pretty good. I'm not going to have to do too much more. If I wanted to make this a little better, the selection is still key. I could have feathered that. That could have made a tighter selection. There's all sorts of things. I wanted to point out that this took me 10 seconds, and it's pretty darn good. If I go over to the layer panel, you can toggle that off and on, and zoom out a little bit. So again, at a distance, what that looks like. I zoom in. That's what
I think
that
I
looks like.
like number three best as well.
Yeah, it seems like that wave kind of feels natural. Now, what I want to point out too is if you have some prior Photoshop knowledge, you can see that in this new layer that was created, it actually generated a layer mask by default. Now, if you happen to know what layer masks are, that's going to help. But essentially, what that means is I can go in and I can paint out or add sections that are distracting, or you know, or not distracting. If I want to kind of play with that area that was selected, I can do that. So again, in this case, it did a pretty good job. I'll just show you how that works. I'm going to go in, and you can see again, I'm
Bring
bringing,
back just the phone.
yeah, or the head, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. But the point being here is that you could play around if there were areas at the edge. Yeah, I'll just bring back the phone, just the floating phone.
It's coming out of the water.
Not distracting at all.
Yeah, they were like, don't ruin a good sunset by taking a selfie. They threw her in the water.
Yeah. So the point is here that again, you can go back and use some of your skills in Photoshop if you want to begin to play around with it. So that's kind of generative fill level 1, which is simply make a selection, click generative fill, and it's going to try to take care of the problem. Now I'm going to do something a little bit more sophisticated, and this is what I'm going to call a generative fill composite. So I have two images here. On the left is a photo that my son took in Thailand, and on the right is a photo I took in Vermont. So opposite sides of the earth. And I chose these two images because, yeah, they basically have the same mood, color tone, the horizon line I lined up. And I'm just going to give you a uh, quick little review of generative fill, the one that we just saw. Like if I wanted to get rid of this telephone wire, I'm just going to click generative fill, generate, and it's going to get rid of it. So again, that's essentially what we did the last time, is you make a selection and it's going to take care of it, get rid of it, which it did. Cool. So there's your review for the day, but now let's go to the intermediate level. I'm going to flatten this entire image for now. And again, I'm going to make a very crude selection. This time I will feather it, but I'm going to essentially select both parts of the two images and the white section in between. I'm going to make a shape like so. And this time I will actually feather it. So feathering essentially is going to soften the pixels on the edges so that it blends in better. Again, that's a technique that's been used in Photoshop forever. And then with that selection made, I'm going to click Generative Fill. Again, nothing in the prompt section. We're going to look at that next. Click Generate. And what it's going to try to do here is essentially blend these two images together. So it's looking at them, it's trying to understand the context, and it gives
That's
us, again,
amazing.
three
That's more
options. Wow,
amazing.
this one gave us a rock. That's
Yeah,
improved,
yeah.
right?
Generative rock.
So I'm just going to toggle through these. I'll zoom in a little bit, and again, um, you try to find that line between the two images where it blended. And I gotta say, in some cases, again, some of them are a little wacky. Like I did select those boats, which kind of threw it for a loop. But the truth is, it's really hard
But you don't
to
have to settle
find.
for three choices. If you click generate again,
Yep, this is true. So again, if you feel like it could have done more, or you just want more options, clicking generate one more time will generate three more. And you can just keep creating variations and then just sit there and sort through the ones that you like.
ooh. So I think that
Yeah.
one worked.
Yeah, let's zoom out a little bit and see.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah,
And of
so
course, you could go
that one
back and
is,
reselect you could redraw your selection. You could
yep,
omit the boat in your selection.
yep. Yeah, again, all those things I showed you with the masking in the previous version would work here. So that's the generative fill. We're actually going to come back to that in just a second, and we'll use another image, and we're going to look at adding prompts. But before we do that, I'm also going to take this opportunity, since we already got this digitally manipulated image, why not manipulate it further? And so we're going to look at um, this option called Generative Expand. So again, this is one of the new tools that were added in Photoshop recently. And the way it works is you click the crop tool, and there's all sorts of ways to do this. I'm going to turn this into a vertically oriented photo. So I'm going to start there, but then I'm going to go up a little bit down a little bit. So I'm going to essentially make it a square. So what I did again was I chose the crop tool and then I dragged the crop preview around the top and bottom of the image. I'm going to click generate. And again, it's doing something similar. It's comparing this image to its database of trained images, and it's going to make stuff up. My
Amazing.
God, this never ceases to amaze me.
Isn't it incredible?
And it's created, the sky, a little bit of weirdness of these
Yeah,
buildings
that's
on the
like
top.
an Incan, you know,
Something,
something.
something.
Yeah.
And again, it works in the same way,
Huh.
in that it gives you variations. This one was really wild. This one decided to add some moss or plankton or something.
And this does answer the question, do you know where to get good Thai food in Vermont?
Yes, this is right. This is going to be, yeah, the display sign for my new Thai venture. That's going to be the name of the store, by the way. Is the new Thai venture.
Thai venture.
Yeah. So that's generative expand, and the two of these again, we just took. Again, I'm going to go back and just show you the original image for a second, and just think about where we came in a matter of 5 minutes. That's the original image. That's the new one.
That's
And
pretty impressive, incredible.
and we used a relatively high resolution ish to begin with, but there's nothing to stop you from taking this photo and doing all the magic or some of the magic that Andrew was showing, and upscaling this and doing whatever else. So before we get more on that generative expand, which we may or may not have time for, I'm going to show you a couple more things with generative fill, and then we'll wrap things up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a blank image, and this is again a novel example, but it's one to kind of show you the power of the generative fill, that you don't really need much to fill. So what I did here was I created a blank document, and I'm going to just click generative fill, and it just asked me what would I like to generate. Now, this is kind of the reason I'm doing this one first, is because this is kind of what you might think of as like the classic AI generative
Yeah, the
imagery.
ho hum. You just type words and it makes pictures for
Yeah,
you.
so
Yeah.
what you might be familiar with if you use Midjourney, you saw some of that in a previous live stream potentially, or Dolly, where you give it a prompt and it creates an image. So the point here being you can do this in Photoshop. You don't have to use those systems. It's doing that. One thing that's worth pointing out is there are a lot of legal and ethical concerns, rightfully so, for a lot of those other systems. Questions of like, where are they getting that imagery? Did they get permission from the authors or the photographers and whatnot? What Adobe is claiming to do here is all imagery that it generates is trained or has been trained on stock photography that they own or they have the rights to. And that's a whole other discussion about like this stance. But in general, they are clearly trying to dodge or navigate some of those thorny legal and ethical issues about, where are these photos coming from? Whose work did you use, and do they know that you're using it? So what are we going to generate here, Andrew? Let's do interior of a
CD motel room near the airport. I don't
seedy
know.
hotel room near the airport. Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to say near the airport, but
Well, maybe we'll put an airplane in the back. Let's start with that.
every
Let's
time
do
it's different.
it
So
is.
the fact that these models are trained on the Adobe stock library does mean that you can use them without concerns like you might with any of the other image generators that were trained on not public domain or owned images. Oh yeah.
Yeah, see, the airport part did a good job, at least putting the airplanes in.
I think the only caveat to that is that it is somewhat limited, and so the Adobe stock library doesn't include things that are branded, brand names, etc. And so,
Yeah.
if you say make me an image of a Cadillac, it's not going to have an actual Cadillac in its model that's tagged as Cadillac, but it may have conjured
Yeah.
up non-branded versions of cars that it might be tagged. So I don't know. It takes a little bit of negotiation to get the right image, I think, but this is
Yeah.
changing. And the other thing is, Jeremy, that so the generative AI machinery that's accessed inside Photoshop is using what Adobe calls Firefly. It's
Hmm.
their image generation tool, and you can access that by just going to Adobe's website and using their tool in the browser to create images as well.
So yeah, and it's fascinating. Some of this stuff again, you'd have to use it with the locate the way that you're using this obviously is something you should pay attention to. When if you examine some of the details with these, especially some of those other ones, that the airport part might have thrown it for a loop in those previous ones, but this one is pretty good in that these pillows and everything seem a little square, but otherwise like pretty good. And so the other piece that you can do here is you can simply modify it. So in other words, let's say you wanted to add a ficus tree in the corner of a room, and you click generate. It's going to again analyze this image, and it's going to hopefully attempt to put a ficus tree in, and then we could kind of play around with it. Oh no, it actually
Well, you
made.
needed to select a section of
Oh
that.
yeah, whoops. Okay,
But
do
why
that.
don't you could expand that room.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time. I'm just gonna do
Okay.
the old. I mean, maybe we'll do that afterwards. So let's try that. All right. So maybe I'll just see ficus tree. I won't even. Yeah. So I guess I just replaced that entire image originally.
Yeah. Well, it's nicer than a CD hotel room. Wow.
And look at that.
So
It,
talk about content aware, right? Like it knew that it needed to put it, well, without exception, behind a pillow, right?
yeah.
Behind the pillow. It doesn't necessarily know that it's a pillow, but it can tell that that's an object that it needs to place it behind.
Yeah. And what's remarkable is it kind of it almost did it mask it? I don't know. It did a really good job of. Let's just see here. Yeah, it's pretty good. Um, if you move that around, you begin to maybe see the.
Well, you'll see that the whole,
Yeah, but it meshed everything extremely well.
yeah. Hey, put a pair of shoes on the bed.
Shoes, okay, shoes, and then we'll move on. So let's do that. How's that? Does that look
That's
good?
usually why I leave mine. Who don't
I,
leave them on the floor of a seedy hotel room?
yeah, that's true. Okay, so I'm going to generative fill pair of
Filthy
men.
sneakers. Oh,
I
I
was going
mean,
to say
hey,
fill
if you were thinking fancier,
men's sneakers. Have to be filthy because otherwise it wouldn't be seedy,
it's true.
right?
And maybe if you spend all your money on your shoes, then you didn't stay in the fancy hotel.
That's true. Oh my
Choices.
God, I blew my salary
Yeah.
on. Well, didn't understand a pair. Maybe
Ah, there we go. That's a pair.
those are good.
Oh, those are good. And it looks like they're
Yeah,
they're heavy,
yeah,
so they're depressing the bed.
definitely like, yeah, there you were like standing on the bed and then you
Yeah,
just
just walked right out of them.
slowly took off your shoes.
Yeah.
Again, it's pretty remarkable. So the last thing we'll do here, just out of the interest of time, is almost a little bit of what we were doing before, just now, but quickly with a pre-existing image. So I'm not going to spend lots of time on here. I do want to show you how you have the opportunity to kind of narrow down the choices that it gives you. So I'm just going to put a boat in here by making, again, you notice all of these, I'm doing this on purpose. The selections I'm making are quite frankly terrible. They're just almost random. And again, doing that on purpose, not because I don't know how to make selections, but because I feel like this shows you like the low bar. Like you don't need to make sophisticated selections to do any of these things. So I'm just going to put in a boat first. Click generate. Again, didn't feather the selection, nothing that fancy. And again, it also points out with this selection, you'll notice that when it does show up, like it puts it inside that selection, but it doesn't try to fill it completely.
Hey, that's a
And
good one.
that's a really good one. That one's interesting, although I don't know what's going on in
Yeah,
there.
that's the outboard motor maybe,
Oh,
but
it's got like a satellite. It looks like that thing on top of the
oh
MIT
yeah, the
building.
LORAN
Yeah.
radar.
Yeah. This one's not bad either. Yeah, this one gave us like some buoys. Yeah, you notice the night the shadow.
There's
The
nobody
direction.
piloting that boat though.
There is no one piling. So again, it can kind of keep on generating, or again, you could modify the selection with
Hey, one
a
thing to mention though, it's pretty cool, right? You just said a boat. If you went to Dolly or Midjourney or even Firefly and said boat,
yeah,
you don't know what you're going to get. You'll get something that may look like a cartoon tugboat. It may
yeah,
look like the Titanic. It may be in this case, it knew that it needed to fit a boat into this sort of lighting with this color palette, and it's a photographic image.
yeah,
So you didn't have to be very specific with your prompt to get reasonably good starting points.
yeah, exactly. And right, it is somehow analyzing the photo and looking for potentially similar photos that were used in its training data. And so it's going to exclude cartoon boats. It's going to exclude a lot of other things because it understands the context of the image. So I'll kind of leave with this. I mean, the last thing though I would probably do is again, like I like this one, this fringy stuff. That's just weird. Um, and so what I would do again here is what I showed you earlier. I would take the layer mask and I would just kind of go in. And again, this is just now old school Photoshop,
I
human
know, old school, dodging
replay.
and burning in the darkroom.
Yeah, but this looks pretty good. And again, there's a lot more. Oh, I do want to show. The last thing I will show is just the culling of the variations. So, well, of course now I have that layer mask. So let's say like this one. I'll bring that back for a second. Um, so this one, let's just say in general, like we want to throw this out because we don't want that globe or what have you. So whenever you have multiple variations, you can go in and there's a little context menu on the right, and you could delete that variation. So we'll go from 6 down to 5. Um, that one is also a little strange, so I'll delete that one. Go from 5 down to 4. Well, we didn't want 2 people, or we wanted 1, so I might delete that one. So in other words, you could create a dozen variations and throw out the ones that just really don't make sense and then sit down and be like, okay, now we've got 3 or 4 good ones. So with that, I think we've taken you on that tour. We're close, if not over our hour, so we want to respect people's time.
Well, it's always good to leave on one mind-blowing note, and that is The magic that we demonstrated with Topaz Photo AI also exists in the video version of that software. And so if you have low resolution video footage, it can apply that same kind of genius to restoring your footage, adding details where there were no details, removing blurriness or shakiness, etc., getting rid of noise on video. We'd love to demonstrate that. I think the problem is that it takes a long time to render just the previews, but you know what? All of this is changing. Who knows? By next week, it might be almost instantaneous.
Yeah, next week we're going to be doing a high definition video and
Oh,
spatial
yeah.
video. We're going to be doing spatial 3D uh, hyper video.
Hypertext.
Video. Well, we hope that you learned something. Again, the combination of these tools, they're just making their way into everyday workflow. Um, it's here. It's here to stay, and it's just getting better.
It's normal. It's just the normal thing, right? Just
It's the
like
new norm.
just like the healing brush, just like the clone tool, all of
Yep.
that.
Well, with that, we bid you adieu. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you down the road with another version of the Gymnasium live stream.
Yeah, sweet.